I met Michael Blake at the Berkeley Film Institute. I was a sophomore going to Cal. Michael had entered the Film Institute, which is now defunct, I think a couple of years after the two of us graduated. But we were both taking directing, acting, and I think editing classes. And we just hit it off.
Michael wrote a screenplay for Jim Wilson called Double Down. They were casting out of Dramalog. And I was working at Raleigh Studios, and I read Dramalog because I didn't have an agent, and so I just had to do everything myself. And I scooted over there for an interview at lunch. And Michael Blake actually happened to be with Jim as he was meeting actors. And Michael and I met outside, and we just talked a little bit, and then we went inside. I had no idea that he was the writer. And I met Jim, and I read a little bit. And then I had to get back to work because I didn't want to lose my job. And they called either the same day or the next day and said, well, you come back. And I was very excited. And it was my first paying job, and I made $500 a week for 4 weeks, so I made $2,000.
We were all trying to accomplish the same thing in the movies. We were nobodies, and we were trying to be somebodies. I think in a honest kind of way. We really were going for the art, not the money.
We would just sit haunted at night, talking into the night about what our lives could be like if we could get our own visions out there.
I had read Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee when I was an underground journalist, and reviewed it, and thought it was a spectacular book because I'd never seen Indians humanized before. And then a few years later, I read it again, and that spurred an incredible amount of reading about Native American history, particularly buffalo culture history. And I never intended to write a book, but the more I read, the more ideas came up inside of me, and I realized finally that I had to write this book.
I had challenged Michael in a very fierce way to write something more than a screenplay, to write a book, because he's a very gifted writer, and he was frustrated with the 120-page format.
He wrote some of it, I know, at Kevin's house. He stayed with my wife and I for quite a while downstairs. We had a little nook where he would go and write, and Michael would come at night, and it was great. My wife and I'd be sitting in bed. We were newly married, and Michael would sit on the edge of the bed.
I remember one wonderful moment. I was reading a chapter to them, and I looked at them, and they were both in bed going, and I stopped. And all of a sudden, their eyes flew open, and then what happened? And I thought, that I'm onto something here.
It was sitting there, it was about that thick, and so I knew it didn't end on page 120. I knew it ended somewhere else. And I just picked it up and started reading, and I never put it down. I never put it down, and I don't think I was ever as proud of anybody at that moment than I was of Michael.
As soon as he finished it, I read it, and I actually said, I've got to own this. I've got to somehow have a piece of this, Michael. So as a producer, I said just that. I'll make you a deal. I'll figure out a way to get this published. I went to New York. I hit the streets, not knowing anything about publishing, found Michael a publisher. I think the advance was like $7,500.
When the novel originally hit the street, it was printed only in paperback. And the publisher perceived it as a romance novel. Not quite a bodice ripper, but definitely in the romantic vein. And they dumped it in airports, 7-Elevens, and so on and so forth. The book actually did very well. They printed 30,000 copies, and I think they sold them all. But as far as they were concerned, they were done with the book.
I retained the film rights, paid Mike a little bit of money, and said to Kevin, this is it.
I said, I'm going to make this into a movie. And I said, I'll pay you as much as I can pay you, which is all the money I had. And I remember on a napkin for $75,000, we paid for the script. We paid for to get a little secretary, and Jim and I went out and scouted the movie. So we actually did our pre-production for $75,000.
I've heard it said that there's many novelists who can't stand apart with this and can't stand apart with that, and who don't know much about how movies flow, and they fall down. They have a very unsuccessful experience. For me, the degree of difficulty of adapting a novel into film is based largely on structure and logistics. I know how to pare down the material because I've had so much experience in the movies. So I'm not conflicted there at all. But the degree of difficulty, as most screenwriters know, doesn't happen during the writing of the screenplay. It happens after you turn it in.
He did a really good job on his first pass. I was really impressed because I didn't know if he was going to be able to do that. I didn't know how to do it, and I didn't know if he was going to be able to know how to do it. And the bones were there. And when I say bones, it was more than bones. And we began working at that point together just really long. And I sat with him, and I wouldn't let him go out of a room till I was satisfied with the rhythm. I made sure he wrote it, but I wouldn't let him leave till I heard it.
I remember sitting out on the grass with him and saying, Kevin, what are you going to do about the language? Or what do you want to do? And he said subtitles. And I said, great.
For Dunbar, that was the great part of his journey, was he so wanted to be close to them, but he couldn't communicate with them. And so I think all the humor and all the drama came out of them not being able to communicate. And if we figured out a way for them both to talk English, then we would have lost all that drama.
Bay Studios said, we love this. We really do. We've come around. We see it full circle. And the one thing that we want to talk to you about, though, is the language. That maybe we don't need subtitles. That maybe there's another way to do it. And Kevin did say to me, he stood up and just very kindly said, look, we've made a mistake. We thought maybe you did understand this better, and if you'll excuse us, we'll go.
If they don't get that part, how are they going to cut my movie? Meaning, if they couldn't understand it intuitively, what was good about it, then how could I possibly let them in the position to edit my movie? So I remember in the midst of getting on my nose, I decided to pile on and say, and by the way, since you're saying no, I was going to want final cut anyway. So I was kind of like really out there. I wasn't trying to be obstinate. It's just, I thought, I got to take care of this thing.
When he said to me that he's going to do the entire thing in Lakota, I said, well, I don't speak it. He says, well, you're going to have to learn, I'm afraid. And I said, oh, well, a challenge is a challenge.
We met with every studio. I met with most independents, too. I mean, at a certain point, there was a couple people that would make it for $9 million or $10 million. And I finally had to, I was willing to make the thing for $10 million at one point, and they wanted to go cheaper than that. At a certain point, as bad as I wanted to make the movie, I said to Jim, I can't make it for that. But I could make it for 13. And so I held firm that I was going to make that. And I went around, and none of the studios would make it. So we decided to try to raise our money foreign first. And Jim and I raised about $9 million.
On the basis of certain pre-sales, which we were able to get done at the time. Not many, but 3 or 4 key sales. France, Germany, Japan, I think, were the 3 territories which we had sold. And that gave them enough confidence. So the bank stepped up for a fairly important amount of cash. And then Kevin and Jim and everyone else were busy running around here in LA getting studios to come along with us.
We were kind of like ready to go, and we needed somebody to help bridge finance. We needed somebody to put cash to let us continue our search for more money, to continue with domestic, trying to find a domestic deal. And Jake said, you know what, I love this project, and I'll advance you $1 million. We went to location. We started to set cast. We had ongoing conversations with Orion Pictures, who ended up purchasing the domestic rights, and a company called Majestic, and Guy East purchased the foreign rights. And so those two coupled together, along with Jake's bridge of $1 million, allowed us to do it.
And I never forget, I found the place where we're going to put Dunbar's little fort when he's out there all by himself. And I ran out there. I just literally ran from the one cut bank down to where maybe the fort could be, and up on the hill over there. And we had inadvertently driven down there, and I saw the tracks that it made. And I said, no one can ever drive down here again, because the tracks literally stayed there. We managed to kind of flush them out, and saw that. And in 30 minutes, I went, this is where it's going to be. This is where it's going to be. And then we hauled ass. And we flew to Rapid City, and we went out and we saw the Indian village where it was going to be. Both of those things came together on that last day.
When Hollywood invades little towns and around the world, it's an amazing thing. And I think Pierre, South Dakota had no idea what was about to happen. I mean, I landed by myself the first time, then I'd bring Kevin and a location manager and a designer and a director of photography the next time, and then all of a sudden it was a flood of Hollywood.
I remember talking to one director. He said, on your first day, remember, anybody can put the camera down once. He said, but you got to figure out where you're going to put your second shot so that you look like you know what the hell you're doing. I knew we were going to shoot this scene, and so I said, okay, we're going to kind of go this way and set up the dolly track, and all of a sudden, boom, it started happening. The grip started setting up the dolly track. The DP, Dean Simler, said, do it right. And I was a stage manager, so I used to do that kind of stuff. And so suddenly it started to go up. I was a little cocky, I walked off and went, wow, this is pretty good. You say put it here, they put it there.
No wonder everybody thinks they can do it, huh?
Yeah. I came back and now they had the camera up and the actor started to walk through and the shot wasn't right. Every time I looked at it, it just didn't feel right. And I thought, oh my God, this is my first shot and everybody's looking at me and this doesn't feel right.
Cut. Come on. We had a jet anyway.
I thought, what am I going to do here? I not only don't even get to put the camera at the second spot of the day to show everybody I know what I'm doing, I've got the camera in the wrong place. And I debated about it. Well, just go with it. What the hell? And something in me snapped and said, you're directing. And I said, this isn't right. I'm wrong. I'm sorry, you guys. Let's have it run the other way. And everybody looked at me for a second. And then they did it. And that 2 moments let me think that I could do this. That moment, and then 2 nights later when we saw the dailies of that day, I looked at it and I go, this looks like a movie.
So you see that his heart's breaking. It makes you feel ashamed. Because this guy's saying he's proud of you, and you know that there's no reason to be proud of you.
From day one, I knew that Kevin was the right guy, that there was no question from day one he was the director. I mean, not only the director, but a great director. I had no question. So it wasn't, I didn't go through 2 weeks and 3 weeks and all of a sudden he began to evolve and become something. It was immediate. I mean, when I saw him set shots, talk to actors, run down the hill, or do another take, look at dailies, talk to him, I knew he was on. I had a doubt prior to it. I don't know until all of a sudden he starts delivering. But after day one, I said, all right, it's going to be a lot of days, and it's going to be tough work. But I thought from the beginning, this guy's actually got it.
You got to roll this way, okay? You got to get this way. And this turns into the crawl. Robert. This turns into the crawl, and then it turns into the knee.
He always encouraged the behavior to be as completely honest and in the moment as possible. There was never an assumption, an Indian woman back then wouldn't do that. There was never that. And I really appreciate it because you can play modesty without acting at, being repressed. Kevin was very clear as a director, particularly about Stands with a Fist. He had very specific ideas about her, which I totally appreciate because it gave me some boundaries as well as some wide open spaces. But to play that relationship with him when he was also directing was actually kind of sweet because for me, it allowed me to watch him be this, really fantastic leader. And that fit perfectly well with the soldier that I was supposed to be admiring.
Good. We'll go again right away. That's the exact angle. Start with those eyes right there. Okay, those eyes. Yeah. When I say action, half a beat there, and not real quick with the eyes. Just a little bit of a look around, a little bit slower. It's a little bit slower. And you feel that you feel it bubbling up in you. Okay? You look around, you see the argument going awry. Okay. Here we go.
It was an inspiration to everybody in the cast and crew to just forge ahead. We'll follow you anywhere.
What Kevin really did in Dances with Wolves as a big-time movie actor that I thought was truly great is that he gave himself up for the story. He made himself a human maypole around which all the action was revolving. Kevin had his wonderful moments, but he was very, very generous with the story and his fellow actors, inviting them in to inhabit this story fully. And I think it has a great deal to do with the success of the movie.
He was generally very clear. He knew exactly what he wanted. He had a vision. He knew shots. He may not have known what lens to shoot them on, and maybe I didn't know what lens to shoot them on at that stage, and a lot of the time it was trial and error.
What do you think, go tighter?
I'd punch in 100, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Go tighter.
We put lenses on the camera, and we moved the camera around until it looked exactly right.
Good, Chooch. Get out, Chooch. Get out.
I'd come back after the take with Kevin at the monitor, and we'd look, and Jim was generally there as well. And they discussed the shot, and Kevin would say, I'm going to do one more. He wouldn't say why. He'd go back and do a variation on a performance.
Okay, right away.
It took us 108 days to shoot it, okay? The average movie was about 60 days at that time. So, we're out there 46 more days, That's a long time to be away from home. And this actor is directing. And so I know there was doubts flowing through everybody. But about the fourth week before we finished the film, our editor pieced some stuff together and brought it to dailies. When the lights came up, there were tears in the eyes of everybody in the room, especially the Native Americans, because no one had really known what they were working on. And he had just cut together 6 minutes of footage.
The very last shot that we shot was Kevin riding to tell the tribe that the buffalo were coming. It's kind of a night shot, and it's like ghostly. He kind of rides out on the horse in the middle of the prairie. That was the last thing we shot. And it was so cold that we were all hiding in vans. We couldn't even get out. And he was out there still with his thing, you know, no coat. Didn't even faze him.
It's okay. Say it again, Doug.
That's a wrap!
Hey!
Look at the cat. Shot of the cat.
I'm gonna be as hard on the studio as I was on these people.
All right, let's go.
If you're gonna be a bully, you gotta be a bully to everybody.
All right!
The largest set piece in dances, clearly, in both the writing of it and Kevin's conceptual of the film, was the buffalo hunt. So we spent more time thinking about how do you do that? How is that arranged? I came across a lot of beautiful locations, but none of them had any kind of buffalo population. I finally hit the Triple U Ranch in South Dakota, and there were a little over 3,000 head there, which was, I think, the largest privately owned buffalo herd in the world. So I talked to Roy Houck, who was the former lieutenant governor of the state of South Dakota, and I explained to him what it was we intended to do with the buffalo. And his grin just was from ear to ear, and he said, "Man, if you can do that, I'd like to see it."
Hello from Houck's Movie Buffalo Ranch.
You're welcome.
Hundreds of horses, hundreds of extras. Gandhi of the Plains right here.
Kevin loved to tell the stories about how buffalo were in the West at one time, about stopping trains for 2 days and how big they used to be and all that. And I think Kevin had a real affinity for buffalo.
I had meetings with Kevin talking about the stunts and the action. He wanted to use Native Americans as stuntmen. He didn't want to do the status quo, which they'd always done, which is bring Hollywood stuntmen out and paint them down. And luckily we found some bull riders and some rodeo guys that were Native Americans, so I knew they were rough and tumble.
We hope they're going to be in here. We think they're going to take the line of that little mini, see that little tiny little creek thing down there? We think they're going to be around about there, which puts us back a bit too far here. I think we'd want to all push down.
We really kind of had a blank chalkboard. We shot that sequence in like about 5 days. And I think if somebody told us that we only had 5 days, we wouldn't have thought we could do it. But we said, well, this is what we're going to do.
So everybody's got to be really looking over at me. And when I wave, that's when you guys will go. Now, don't get yourselves in positions that you can't get out of. I mean, it's pretty scary, but I don't need for you to get too far in front of the buffalo. Basically, we're trying to push them towards that camera and up to our right, okay? We're not trying to have them go that way, so you realize that this crest, if you're on that crest, maybe they'll see you and they'll continue to bend that way.
Buffalo, we're 5 minutes away. Everybody get 2 cameras.
I think we had 9 cameras on it. I know I was on a crane, and there's a classic shot that's used in all the trailers. They use it at the Academy Awards. It's Kevin riding at a gallop coming up over the rise with a buffalo behind him, and I was on the crane. I did that shot.
I kind of just knew what I wanted to do, and I didn't think of it as a burden, you know, as an extra thing. The producing was actually harder, to make real critical decisions about what I was actually trying to do artistically.
During the shooting of the film, I never contemplated an Oscar. You're just trying to get through the day. I'm just trying to get my money collected from the foreign distributors and get people on set and keep Kevin healthy and just be the producer, just chug along. So I'm not kidding you. We finished even the cut of the movie, showed the studio. They had 2 previews. The previews went brilliantly. The scores were high. They said, boy, this could be a hit. I mean, this actually might work. You know, and I heard him say this might be a hit, and thank God, I just wanted to get off the hook, because we had a loan for, you know, almost $17 million, and I needed to get that back before I started feeling good. So I certainly didn't put the Oscar hopes high. And in fact, I think it was a month or 2 after we finished the cut before one person mentioned to me, hey, you know what, this is that good.
When I watched the movie, I was totally transported away, and it was like the lights were coming up, and I said, is it over already? You know, at 3 hours, that's a long picture, but it just sailed right through it.
The wonderful thing was that after the movie was over, this was in a mall, all the Indian people came out and they spontaneously started to dance.
It was new territory, and in a lot of senses, I felt like, well, you know, maybe this is really helpful for us as Native storytellers, Native filmmakers, Native artists.
My viewing of this film is combined with America's response to it, because every time I saw it was in a public forum, and people were so taken with it that the experience of watching it included many, many, many discussions with people afterwards. People needed to talk. So it became the public's domain.
When you see the finished product after the labor of love that you've put into it, you forget anything that may have been difficult or the hard work or whatever. You really do forget it, because then you look at that and you say, wow, there it is all together.
The funny thing about Dances was, in this day and time of opening weekends, Dances was never number one, ever. The most it ever made was over Christmas. It made $12 million 1 week. $12 million, that was it. And it went on to make, 12 years ago, $180 million. So it just played for 50 weeks, and people went to see it and talked about it. It was a really wonderful time.
You never know what's going to catch and what isn't. And then when it did open, and then it did get the reviews, and then it did do the business it did, then you kind of know.
I was doing a play in Ottawa at the time at the National Arts Centre there, and my wife and I were, she was a stage manager, and we were getting ready to go into rehearsal. I'm having a cup of tea, standing in front of the television when they announced it. And I didn't believe what I heard. And, I started freaking out, screaming and yelling. She come running out. What's the matter? What's the matter? I said, look. By this time it was over, and she said, what? And I said, I've been nominated for an Academy Award. Yeah, sure you did. By the time we got to rehearsal, there was 2 or 3 news crews trying to barge into the rehearsal hall, and it was just nuts from there on. It was just mayhem.
Every time that you get nominated, every time your film gets nominated, it doesn't matter what category. If you had nothing to do with John Barry's score, the fact that John Barry got nominated gives you a sense, I got to be there for this. This is the big moment. Or Dean Summer's cinematography, or Michael Blake's script, or Kevin's acting, or Jim's producing, whatever it is. If you're not, and I wasn't involved direct with any of these things, I'm the money guy, so I don't personally get involved with any of those aspects of it. But nonetheless, it's your baby too.
I think the limo arrived at about 2:30 to pick us up, and the door opened in the back, the chauffeur opened the door, and a smoke poured out, and I put my head in there, and there's Graham Greene sitting in there. Hey, pal, he said, a big old cigar and a glass of scotch, and he said, hey, So it was great. We had a good drive to the Academy Awards. So that sort of broke the ice a bit in getting there.
I was really happy for everyone that went out there and trusted me and made the movie with me, and they had been recognized, and I just spent my time getting as many friends as I could into the building.
I thought, wow, the nomination to me was enough, and I thought, well, if I win the Oscar, fabulous, but I thought, I felt I already won by just being nominated.
Well, I'm always convinced that I lost at the Academy Awards because I didn't get the lucky nickel that Michael Blake kept giving. He was giving out buffalo head nickels to certain people, and I didn't get one, so maybe that's why I lost. Because I think they work. Everybody that had one won.
I had a very childlike experience with it. I was kind of innocent and having a great deal of fun. I didn't anticipate who would win, how many would win, what would win. I was really afraid to lose because I don't like losing anything. And I did lose and got through it. So that was kind of great, But it was very delightful to be there because there were so many of us. That was what was so unusual.
I thought Bruce Davison was going to win myself. It was a big shock when Joe Pesci won. He didn't suspect it either. He just... He flipped. He thought I was going to win. So.
When I got nominated, you're a shoo-in, you're going to win. And I kept saying, don't say that. Don't tell me that. As a matter of fact, I asked my wife, I said, she was obviously sitting next to me, I said, if somebody else wins this award, would you hang on to me? Because I'm so prepared to win that I'm going to stand up and I don't want to make a fool of myself. So hold on to me until we're sure that I won the award. And I didn't want to hear that stuff, It
was pretty damn special. It was pretty special, but I didn't realise how important it was to my home country, to Australia. I didn't ever realise until I was on a plane flying home. I got on a Qantas plane, fly back to Sydney, And the stewardess came up and said, well, Mr. Semler, do you have it with you? I said, what do you mean? She said, the Oscar. I said, yes, I have, as a matter of fact. She said, oh, do you think it'll be prudent to show the passengers? And I said, well, I don't think they're going to be interested. At 3 o'clock in the morning, they've been flying for 11 hours, they're all grumpy and smelly, and they don't want somebody waving a trophy around in their face. She said, I think you'll find it. And I said, all right, okay. So I pulled the Oscar out of my little bag, and I then realised how important it was for my country, because people wanted to be photographed with it and do interviews and video, and I thought, wow, really means something down here.
It turned out wonderful for me. I was so glad to say something through my speech in Lakota that night. Whether anybody liked my speech or didn't like it, I was so glad that Doris was there, Doris Leader Charge, to say the words in Lakota, because it was in the spirit of how the book was written and how the movie was made, and it spoke to someone besides an American sitting in front of their television set. Showed the whole world. It acknowledged that there's other people, other languages. So I was extremely proud of that.
Of course you want Kevin to win, and of course you want Jim to win, but there were many other elements that made it so important to us. And of course they began to win, and you do get a sense that there's a bit of a wave going on, there's a bit of a roller coaster, and when you start to win those key ones, the excitement really starts to bubble up and fever over, because you have a real shot at Best Picture.
You're thinking, would I love to win? You betcha. Are you going to win? No guarantees at all. And yes, you'd heard your music repeatedly, but it was a grand evening. So I was just reveling in the fact that there's our little movie that could, in a way, and that people were appreciating it. And you knew Oscar by Oscar, then more people are going to see your film, which is what I wanted. You want as wide an audience to see this again and again. I mean, I felt that strongly about that. So that was the deal. And they finally call your picture out as the winning deal. You're over the moon. I mean, it's just like, what more can you do? You go nuts. So you just try to stumble up the stairs and say a few words and, get the hell out of there.
I think it was the writer who walked through the door and handed his Oscar over his. So I held an Oscar that night.
We had 7 Oscars sitting on the table, and that's pretty good, And then Kevin leaned over and goes, "You want to touch this one?" But
we had our own party where the press wasn't invited. Maybe I haven't done it right in my life. I just felt that you see the press all night, but then when you go to be with the people that you made the movie with, I really wanted to be with those people, and I didn't want to do any more interviews.
It was a great time to make a movie, and it felt like you really made something important. You were doing something that was for kind of a greater good.
If you get one dance, you've had a great career in the film business. It's a very emotional thing to talk about. I don't know a single person who worked on dances, and there were hundreds, who wasn't deeply affected by it.
The energy force of so many individuals that were a part of that project was one of caring very deeply that this story was being told in the best way that it possibly could. So there's a lot of love that's gone into this piece.
It was such an extraordinary experience, and something that to witness that was a pretty special part of your life.
When I look back on dances, I remember the family and how hard it was for us to let it go when it was finished. It was nice when it won the Academy Award, because then we all had a party together and we all got back together. And there's still a bond between all of us, all the people that worked on that show.
It wasn't just a movie after all, was it? No, it actually wasn't. It actually was something better than that. It was something more. It was bringing to life, to awareness, to the present moment, the champions and a champion of that particular culture that has been struggling for so long to stay alive. And here was this beautiful, beautiful example of the strength. In my opinion, it was a perfect choice.
When I think of Dances with Wolves and what it means to me, I can't be succinct about that at all. In fact, I can't even define it. It's larger than that. It's something that came out of me and came back to me in the most wondrous way that anyone could imagine.
In your life, there's smells that you'll never forget, and there's places you never forget. And for dancers, there is a feeling I'll never forget. And the feeling was trusting yourself. The heck with the rest of the world be damned. If you know in your heart you're not an irresponsible person, you're not going out and just trying to make some vanity piece. We had a story about a man who wanted to communicate so badly with his fellow man, who was so lonely because he couldn't, and he did everything that he could, and it was a beautiful culture that no longer exists. And I could tell in the writing that we had that story. So for me, the biggest fear was not making that movie.
Good night, sweet prince.